Well, what's different about these marches is that the driving force is young people, students, young professionals. Clearly, the climate change campaign for urgent action is getting its fuel from them, and the rest of the world is sort of being pulled along. But not all young people agree on what action is needed to fight climate change or which political party can help turn aspirations into action. With me now are four young political activists to discuss the marches today and the way forward. Kate Strathdee is a second-year global and international studies student. She is a Green Party supporter. Trevor Stewart is a third-year conflict and human rights student. He is a member of the Liberal Party. From Montreal, we're joined by Andrew Zettel. He is a graduate in political science and a member of the Conservative Party. He joins us, as I say, from Montreal, where the big march is taking place today. And James Casey is a political science and economics student and a member of the NDP, here with me in the studio as well. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here to talk about this important issue. And I guess where I want to start is just by opening up the floor a little bit to the conversation about this big march today and how that's sort of galvanized the intention of the entire country here, and wondering what you think, how this should influence the debate we're having now on climate change. Who wants to start?
I guess I'll go first. I think it's really, it really shows how much young people really want this question of, the environment and climate change really on the ballot. And I think that, with the mass organizing done today by all the climate activists and Greta Thunberg coming to Montreal, really inspiring a lot of young people especially, and really just echoes the concerns and frustrations among young people. We really feel like there's not really as much action being done on the climate front as necessary, and that speaks to, the frustration among young people nowadays.
Kate, what do you think?
I agree with your comments. I believe that this action is showing that climate change is the most important issue for young people today. As well, I think we're seeing that these strikes have been pushing politicians to make bigger promises, as we've seen Justin Trudeau announce that he's going to transfer our economy to a green economy by 2050, but I think we should take things with a grain of salt because he has no concrete steps to get there, and he's been known to break his promises.
All right, and Andrew, let me go to you in Montreal. How do you feel does a march like this today, how should it influence the conversation the country's having right now on climate change and what to do about it?
Well, I'm on Sherbrooke Street here in Montreal, where a lot of the march is taking place. So it's definitely a big day for climate change awareness, and it's timely that we're in a federal election. I think we should always keep in mind that this is one piece, definitely, of the environmental conversation. I think the enthusiasm that young people show today and in other demonstrations makes it clear that politicians all need to have something to say on climate change as well as on how to protect our environment more broadly.
Okay, and Trevor, how about you? Let me hear you.
Yeah, so millennials in our generation now form the largest voting bloc in this federal election, and the number one issue for us is climate change, making climate change essentially the top issue in Canada right now. And I think we can see that reflect in the way the party leaders have been acting and in the promises that they've been making in this federal election campaign. As early as it is, they're taking it seriously, which is something refreshing. All party leaders are finally taking it seriously. So I definitely think we're going to be seeing concrete steps from all parties to ensure that this issue is properly addressed.
Well, why are we seeing young people in the streets?
I think that we're really concerned about the future. We're going to have to inherit this country, and for future generations are going to have to inherit this country. And we're hearing, when I talk to people about, did you hear about that report on climate change? And they ask me which one. And that to me is really concerning, because we shouldn't be having a bunch of reports telling us that we need to act now, especially one that gives us a deadline of 11 years to act.
But are young people in the streets because they've come to a point, and they've been in the streets before. I mean, it's not the first time we've had it, but we're seeing huge numbers here. And is that an indication that, that you feel kind of shut out by the political process?
You think that politicians aren't doing enough? They haven't taken serious action on climate change fast enough, so we gotta let our voice be heard.
Trevor?
Yeah, I think unlike things like health or trade or infrastructure, climate is something that we're seeing the effects of. We're seeing it happen right now. We're seeing it happen with incredible heat waves. We're seeing it happen with huge flooding. My community has been heavily impacted by flooding we've never seen before. So it's impacting Canadians, and more precisely young people right now, because we're all about the future. Young people, our generation, it's all about thinking of the future, think of what we're going to be doing in this generation and in this world. And
Does that mean that you're not necessarily your parents, but does that mean people in my generation you don't think are?
well, it's so like the older generation right now, we're seeing that their number one issue is health in this federal election. So I'm seeing that a lot of generations are pushing their self-interest, whether we like it or not. And our generation, we're seeing, a cut and an end to our future, a possible end to our future, if we don't address climate change as a serious political issue, which it is.
All right, Andrew, let me go to you in Montreal. As a young Conservative supporter, I mean, Mr. Scheer's getting lots of heat in this campaign that he's not serious about climate change. He wasn't at any of the marches today. Is that a big deal to you?
Well, you mentioned about whether young people feel shut out of the political process at all. I mean, I think politicians generally like to make these grand statements and show up at these large events and get photo ops. But at the end of the day, do they have any real action to show on climate change? I mean, we've had our Prime Minister say he's very committed to the fight against climate change, but over the past 4 years, he hasn't been able to advance us towards the Paris climate targets that were set and developed by Stephen Harper's government. So I think it's important for politicians to have a plan on this. It's going to be something talked about. At the end of the day, I think in an election, however, affordability, access to good jobs are going to be the number one issue. For younger voters, this is probably a close second.
All right, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think we should be, like he said, hailing the Harper government got us into the Paris Climate Accords. I believe it's a Harper government that pulled us out of the Kyoto Accords, which was really helping out the environment. Saying that the Liberals have done nothing in 4 years is just not true. We put a tax on carbon, we put a pricing on pollution, something the Conservatives are currently fighting against, which I find like the science and the data shows that putting a price on pollution works. We're now formed on banning plastics in 2021. We're moving with infrastructure projects that are promoting green energy. We're putting $1.5 billion in cleaning our rivers, our oceans, and our bodies of water. That $1.5 billion has never been seen in Canadian history before, an investment to clean our waters.
What do you both think? Both your parties believe in pricing carbon, but but you're clearly not satisfied with the record of the current government or the promises the Liberals are making.
No, obviously these are all a bunch of pretty words, and there might have been some action, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter if you buy a pipeline in the end, $4.5 billion leaky pipeline, which if there was even a small spill of that on the coast, the government actually doesn't have the resources to actually be able to clean that and save the coast, and that's one of the things that we actually announced today was we're announcing $40 million to protect the coast.
Right. Kate, what do you think?
Both the Liberals and the NDP don't have any clear targets to get us to be carbon neutral by 2050.
Not true.
Also not.
The Liberals, they don't have plans for the next 5 years, next 5 years, next 5 years. The NDP still supports natural gas. Jagmeet Singh won't reject the LNG project.
He was asked about it today, do you flat out reject it or not? And he wouldn't answer the question. He said, look, I believe that eventually we have to get off fossil fuels. But let me come back to you in Montreal. Andrew, let me ask you. So if it's, these other parties are setting these targets and they say they want to take more action. The Conservative plan is not about taxing carbon. And so why do you believe that young people should be drawn to the Conservative plan ahead of the plans offered by the parties supported by your colleagues?
Well, I think in broad strokes, it's more realistic. It talks about our investments that we can make in green technology, as well as the fact that Canada exists in the world with other large global players, and so we should be taking this fight global. I think by focusing too much over the last few years on taxation, we actually make it seem like there's only one solution to this problem. And, yesterday the Prime Minister came with a photo op, paddling a canoe down the river and announced that he's going to send low-income families camping at the end of the year. So that's great. So we'll increase the cost of living on gas and groceries and then send you camping at the end of the year. I don't think that's a credible plan. And I think that if we can combat climate change, but also protect the rest of our natural environment, our lakes, rivers, national parks, those are the types of things that I'm hearing from Andrew Scheer and that I'm hearing from the Conservatives. And so I think young people can get on board with that plan as well.
Okay, let's finish on this. Time's almost out here, but let me finish with all of you on this question. How optimistic are you that a significant event like these marches today will actually result in some kind of more dramatic action to fight climate change?
I would say that it definitely brings it more into the conversation, but we still need action on the climate front. We can do all these rallies as much as we want, but the optimism in me is growing less and less more, because for how many reports need to come out for us to be able to do something. I think that in this election, it's going to be, very clear what young people want. It's just up to the politicians to be able to pull through on that.
Kate, how optimistic are you?
I am optimistic. I believe that young people are passionate about this and that they will get out to vote because they know that governments aren't doing enough. It's just how many people will get out and whether the older generations will listen.
I'm very optimistic. I think our politicians are finally listening to us. I think we're finally seeing concrete actions on all fronts. And one 16-year-old Swedish girl was able to revolutionize the world. Imagine what 500,000 young people in Canada can do, which is what we're seeing today. So I'm very excited.
Andrew, is this you think this is a one-off today, or we're going to see more of this, and is it going to prompt greater action from our political leaders?
Well, in some ways, I think it puts us on the map. And like I said, this is part of a global movement of demonstrations. And so I think if Canada can engage with the world on this, then definitely change is possible.
All right. Thank you all for your time today. Good to talk to you, and we'll continue to follow the story. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.